Hi, everybody. Matthew Turnage here. This week is the 43rd anniversary of the release of Van Halen's debut album. And as Van Halen was one of the first bands that I really got into back in my early teenage years when I started really getting deep into rock and buying albums and listening to a lot of music, I thought I would do a video ranking their 12 studio albums. So here we go. Number 12, Diver Down. It's not a horrible album by any means, but I really have to knock it down because it's almost half the album are cover songs, and there's some good cover songs. The first one, Where Have All the Good Times Gone, is probably my favorite track on the whole album. And the Happy Trails cover at the end is nice too. Of course, it's got a good cover of Pretty Woman, but although Van Halen during the Roth era did a lot of great covers, I mean, you really want to hear their originals, or at least I do. And of the just over half that's original music, about half of that is instrumental doodles. So you really only get, I think, about four new true Van Halen songs. Hang 'em High is pretty good, and the rest are just kind of forgettable to me. So Diver Down is not a bad album, but I would reach for almost anything else in their catalog before this one. So it's on the bottom. Number 11, the album that probably would be number 12 on most people's lists, Van Halen 3. I think this album gets unfairly knocked sometimes. It's really not, it's not terrible by any means. It's not up to their usual standards, though. The lead single off the album, Without You, I think is really good. I think I would say it's one of my favorite Van Halen songs, and there's a couple other really good ones on here, like Fire in the Hole, Ballad of the Bullet. It's got its moments, but it also has some songs that just don't really come together. It's like they needed a little more work, a little more editing maybe. But I think Gary sings pretty well on it, so you know. I think it's as an album it works a little bit better than Diver Down, but it's still not quite up to their usual standards. Number 10, OU812. I kind of hate putting this album so low because this was the first Van Halen album I bought. Although I first heard the band when MTV came to my local cable in my small town in 1984, and of course the album 1984 was huge at that point. I remember seeing those videos a lot. I remember the hits from 5150 coming out, but I wasn't a big music buyer at that age. As I got into my junior high and very beginning of my high school years, that's when I really started listening to a lot of music and buying a lot of music. And at that time, OU812 was the current album, and it had two songs that I was very familiar with from watching MTV that I still think are two of their best songs from the Sammy Hagar era. Finish What You Started and When It's Love. I think both of those songs are great, and I still love listening to those today. The album as a whole, though, it's not a very deep album. You've got those really strong tracks at the top. Cabo Wabo is pretty good. I always liked Source of Infection, and Mine All Mine kind of grew on me, but there's some other tracks on here that I could easily do without. It's not a good listen all the way through. Although the sort of with the Beatles inspired cover is nice. All right. Next up, number 9, Be a Different Kind of Truth, which will unfortunately go down as their final studio album, but they brought Dave back. However, we've got Wolfgang instead of Michael Anthony on bass, and Wolfgang plays very well on it. I really like his bass performance on this, but it's just not quite the same Van Halen without Michael Anthony's backing vocals. Uh, Still, they dusted off a few old tracks and wrote a few new ones that are really good. "She's the Woman" is one of their songs that goes all the way back to before the first album, and it kind of got updated with some new lyrics. But it's the best song on here for me easily. But there's some other really good tracks on here too. I like "As Is." "Out of Space" is good. "Stay Frosty." Uh, "Big River" and "Beats Working." I like all those songs. It's a good album. It's not quite uh, up to their very best standards, but I think it was a good album to go out on. But like I said, my only knock really is no Michael Anthony. I mean, if he had been on there, it might have moved up a couple slots. Next up is the final studio album they did with Sammy Balance. This really starts off strong. The Seventh Seal is a killer tune, and I like "Can't Stop Loving You" a lot. I know some people don't like those kind of Sammy ballads. They think they're a little too sappy, but to me it's a great song. It's one of Sammy's best. And there's some other songs. There's some interesting instrumentals on here too. But yeah, they did some better stuff than this, but this is a really good album, and certainly well worth your time if you haven't checked it out. So what are we up to? Number 7. "Fair Warning." This album's a little bit of a mixed bag for me. It's got two of my all-time favorite songs. In fact, my favorite Van Halen song of all time is on here, "Unchained." That's a song that I don't think I'll ever get tired of. And it's also got "Mean Street," which is right up there. That's probably in my top 5 Van Halen songs. The problem is the rest of the album is not quite up to that standard for me. It's not a bad song on the album at all, but the rest of the songs to me range from good to just so-so. But still, this is, to me, when I think of the legendary Van Halen Brown sound, this is sort of the peak to me of that guitar tone, that classic guitar tone that Eddie had. All right, number 6 for Unlawful, "Carnal Knowledge." So this was the first Van Halen album that I bought brand new when it came out. And I have a lot of fond memories of the release of this album and those videos like "Pound Cake" and "Run Around." Of course, "Right Now" was the huge hit. "Top of the World" was also on there. I really liked it a lot. But I think it's a really good album. It's a really very consistent album. It's really obviously one of the high points of the Sammy era. Songs like "Judgment Day," I think that's a great tune. "Man on a Mission" I like. "The Dream Is Over." It's there's really not a bad song on this album for Unlawful, "Carnal Knowledge." Number 6. All right, number 5. "Women and Children First." This was a killer album. I remember when I first got it as I was getting into Van Halen, and it just really blew me away. A few tracks in particular, of course, the opening and "The Cradle Will Rock" is a great song, and it was years, I think, before I realized that other than the little overdub, little guitar accents throughout and stuff, that the backing track has no guitar on it. That Eddie's playing an electric piano that's kind of taking a page from John Lord's handbook and running his his keyboards through a guitar amp to get a really harsh, distorted sound. So it's the electric piano on that riff and throughout the whole backing track on the song. But it was, I probably had this album at least a couple years before I found that out. But then Everybody Wants Some is on this album, which is one of my all-time favorites. It's such a classic and used to great effect in one of my favorite 80s movies, Better Off Dead. If you haven't seen that movie, take the time. It's a classic of the 80s teen comedy genre. You've also got Romeo Delight, which is a killer song, great riff there. And I always really liked "Could This Be Magic" on this one too. It's a fun song, and what I liked about Van Halen during the Roth era, they didn't always take themselves too seriously. All right, so number 4 now, Van Halen 2. This is to me one of the ultimate party records. It's such a good time album. Of course, it starts off really kind of dark with their cover of "You're No Good," but then after that, I mean, it's just so many fun songs. "Dance the Night Away," "Somebody Get Me a Doctor," which was one of my favorite songs of theirs too. What a rocker! Uh, DOA is another good one. "Light Up the Sky," and of course, "Beautiful Girls," which I always love the song, but I can't think of it without thinking of that Saturday Night Live commercial that used it back in the Chris Farley, Adam Sandler era. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll let you find that one because it's such a great SNL spoof commercial. All right, number 3, I'm going with the debut album, Van Halen. A lot of people will say this is number 1, and I can't really argue with that. I think it gets dropped down a few spots for me just because I've heard these songs so many times. The radio, classic rock radio, loves this album, and rightly so. But sometimes I just get tired of hearing the songs as great as they are. Of course, Eruption, Eddie really makes his presence known on that one, but so many other good songs. Jamie's Crying was always one that I loved. Ain't Talking About Love. Yeah, you can't go wrong with this one, but there's still 2 ahead that I think are just a little bit better. Number 2, say 5150. Not everybody loves the Sammy Hagar era, and that's fine, but like I said, even though I was first introduced to the band right at the end of the Roth era, I really became a fan during the Sammy era. I got to see them live with Sammy, and he put on a great show. He's such a great singer, and this album, a lot of people talk about the more commercial direction from the Sammy era, but I think if you were to strip off all the vocals on this album and the album that came right before it, the last Roth album, and just listen to the music, just the backing tracks, no vocals, I think you'd find that they're very similar albums. This is a very logical progression musically from where they just came from. A lot of the styles on the previous album really, it's just the next logical step forward on this one. Of course, Sammy's singing style and his lyric writing style especially really shake things up from what we had been getting before. But it's got one of my all-time favorite Van Halen songs on here is "Why Can't This Be Love." I love that song. I love the synths in that. "Dreams" is another great song. "Summer Nights," great guitar riff in that one. And I think the title track is an absolute classic that doesn't get the attention it deserves. The guitar playing on that is just outstanding. Eddie really shines on that track, and I think this is really, in a lot of ways, a real pinnacle of his creativity. And I just love this album. I can't say enough good about it. But number one is the album that preceded it, and that's 1984. I love this album. Like I said, this is when I first heard Van Halen, even though I didn't start buying their albums for a few years later. Of course, Jump is so iconic. Panama, Hot for Teacher. That was a video that I loved back in the early days of me watching MTV. But then you've also got songs like Top Jimmy is great. I'll Wait is great. Very much kind of a darker kind of vibe on that one, but a classic. And the last track is actually a song that had been around a long time, but they finally put down on tape. House of Pain. I love that song too. Great album. Great band. Sad to see them go, but we'll always have this great music and great memories of what a genius guitar player Eddie Van Halen was. Thanks for watching.